Hey kids, howdy and welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. That's me, and Zoe is back.
Hello.
Zoe, I missed you last week.
Yeah, I missed you too.
It was odd. It was odd to do the podcast without your sort of being on the other side of the space. So I missed your participation. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a week. We got a new moon in Virgo. We've got Mercury going direct. Huzzah and hooray! And one of the triple transits, the first one in Venus's direct motion since she went around, turned direct on the 3rd. But first, let's do a question. So this is from Mary, who writes, "Hi, Michael and Zoe. I'm always wondering about interpreting house sign placements of the planets in a birth chart. What weight is given to, the sign ruling the house in the chart?" The second thing she's positing is the sign that naturally rules that house, and the sign the planets in that house are in. For example, I have Aquarius rising. Aries is the natural ruler of the first house. Yes, that's true. And my Moon-Mercury conjunction in the first house is in Pisces, which is the next sign after Aquarius. I love your podcast so much. I learned something from both the astrology and the dream sections every week. Gratitude and blessings to you, Mary. Well, thank you, Mary. And I love this question because it's top of mind. I'm in the process of teaching my class, Astrology 101, right now, teaching people all of these distinctions. So you've got 3 questions, or 3 sort of areas of this question. The sign that rules the house, the second distinction you're giving, the sign that is the natural ruler of the house, and then the sign that planets might be in within that house. So we're going to start with the middle one, the natural ruler of the house in question. Any house in your astrological chart has a natural ruler from what we call the natural zodiac wheel that starts with Aries and ends with Pisces. And the house meaning is associated with the sign that is in the order of the natural zodiac. So what the temptation is to think is that signs rule the natural house. But that's not really accurate in terms of how I want you all to be thinking about the houses. For example, the first house is about the self because that's a house that is ruled by Aries in the natural wheel. It's the first house. Aries is the first sign. It's the sign that represents the self and impulsiveness, and it's ruled by Mars, and Mars is the physical body. So you could say that, yes, the first house is ruled naturally by Aries. But I don't want you to think about that because then you're confusing signs and houses as if they're the same thing, and they're not. The first house represents the self because Aries is the first sign, but now you need to throw that away. So in your consideration, Mary, I don't want you to think about that second question piece at all. Do not think about Aries ruling the house. But you got to know what the house means, right? You got to know that the first house is about the self, that the third house is about communication, but I don't want you to think, oh, it's ruled by Gemini in the natural order, because that's just going to be confusing, and it's not accurate. It's just not accurate to think of the houses as the signs that rule them, but to understand the house meaning is inspired by the sign that rules it. But throw that away. It's just confusing. And part of why it's confusing is that in Placidus' house system, when you know what time you were born, the way the chart will be oriented will have different signs ruling the different houses. And in Mary's case, it's Aquarius. Aquarius is the sign that rules her first house. So that one way of putting that is she's an Aquarius rising. But understand, every house in every chart is going to be ruled by one of the 12 signs. And so then the interpretation of this would be that that sign's meaning, first house of self, third house of communication, seventh house of relationship, will be experienced by that person as being driven by the lens of the sign that rules it. So, first house is self. Aquarius is about the intuitive function, the unique original way, the kind of detached sense of I go my own path, but I serve the community. That's energy of Aquarius that describes Mary's first house, because that sign rules that house. And so her experience of self is all about understanding self through the lens of Aquarius. Now, the next sign after Aquarius is Pisces, and Mary's tells us that she has planets in Pisces, specifically her moon and her Mercury. They're conjunct in Pisces in the first house. So now you have to blend the interpretation. The self is driven by the Aquarius archetype in this case, and then having Mercury and Moon in the first house means the self is compelled to relate to itself through the unconscious process. Moon in the first house is like a longing to know oneself really deeply in an unconscious way, and Mercury in the first house might be about communication being a big part of how that person operates. But the way you interpret the moon and Mercury in this chart is that it's Pisces quality. Yet the sense of self is driven by the Aquarius rising lens. This is where it gets a little complicated, but you honor, for my money, the sign that the planets are in as primary, colored by the lens of the sign that rules the house, and the house describes the area of consciousness that the planets are playing their game out. That's all I'm going to say, kids. I hope you followed me. For those of you who did, congratulations. For those of you who didn't, then the left brain analytical geometrical part of astrology is going to be a little harder for you than others. A good astrologer can do the left brain analytical structure stuff and the intuitive stuff with equal measure. And the answer I just gave was pure technical and left-brained and might have left some of you going, what's he talking about? But hopefully some of you got it as well. And thanks for the question, Mary. So we're still in the Virgo mansion for the first 3 weeks of this month. And this Thursday, we wrap up the lunar cycle that we're in, and we start the next lunar cycle. That lunar cycle that we start up this Thursday is all about healing, integration, process, putting things together, health and healing.
Is it Libra season?
Well, it will be Libra season towards the end of the month. This is the month that the sun will move into Libra, and we actually have a equinox on September 23rd. That's when the sun moves into Libra. We're in the autumnal equinox in the north, spring in the south. But we ain't there yet. We're still in Virgo season. And so we're setting intentions that align us with putting all our ducks in a row. I sometimes call this the Humpty Dumpty new moon because, you know, any way that we've been shattered in the previous lunar cycle that included the double retrogrades and, was quite a lunar cycle. And in fact, I think it's elegant that Wednesday, Mercury goes direct this week, and then the next day we start the next lunar cycle, so that lunar cycle has Venus's retrograde way in our rearview mirror, and we're done with the Mercury backward portion. He'll be wrapping stuff up. I'll talk about this in a minute on the podcast, but this next lunar cycle that starts Thursday has a quietude of mind and heart because the backward journey is complete of both Venus and then Mercury as well, because he turns around, goes direct the day before the new moon. I always like to remind people that the sign of Virgo is ruled by both Mercury and Chiron. And this is where Virgo becomes a sign that is profoundly healing and integrative, because Chiron's influence and Virgo's ability to attend to all the little moving parts and the systems that drive everything, then this is a new moon where we can set intentions to heal anything that needs healing, to integrate anything that we've been sort of like moving through in the last couple of months, and any needs of the body at a physical level are a good sort of thing to be thinking about when we start off of a lunar cycle that begins with a Virgo new moon. The new moon is opposite Neptune. So we've got a new moon in Virgo, which is all about like the flesh, and it's opposing Neptune in Pisces, which is all about spirit. Anytime we're in the realm of Virgo and Pisces, we are, spiritual beings having a human experience. And so in some ways, this new moon is all about that, because there's this opposition between the very grounded, body-oriented Virgo sensibility of I'm in a body. The body, pumps blood and moves forward in space, and that needs my attention on a day-to-day basis. Virgo is also the sign that rules daily routine. What do we have to do every day? And I would say this is a perfect new moon to say, all right, what do I have to do every day with my little body to make sure that my body is ready to bring all of the spiritual energy that animates it into it and fill it up with the love, of the divine? There's a beautiful grand earth trine created by this new moon, which I love, because grand trines are like manifestation vortexes. A grand trine splits the circle into 3 equal portions. It's a triangle. Triangles are flowing geometry. The most flow that's available when 2 bodies interact is when they're in a 120-degree triangle. 3 of them spread out across the cosmos has that name, that moniker of grand, and in this case, Earth, because they're all in Earth signs, trine. That's beautiful for an intention-setting moment, because you can think of our intention setting as our participation in the laws of attraction and the idea of manifesting your desires, which always has to start with an intention. In order to create things that exist in form on the Earth energy is best for that. And since one of the things that's needed when we create something new through intention is the conviction of all our gravitas, our sense of power and authority and juice from the unconscious. Like if your unconscious doesn't think you can deserve something or make it happen, it won't happen. Your intention can go up one wall and down the other. But if in the basement of you, you don't feel like you have the cojones to make something occur, it can't come. And that's a Pluto thing. Pluto offers us the power and authority and certainty of our power and authority, and this new moon trines Pluto. So that means that as we set intentions with our minds, the Mercury-ruled Virgo mansion, we borrow from Pluto the power, gravitas, and juicy energy that we need to create anything we might desire. Because without participation of the unconscious, you ain't going to create anything. The Taurus portion of this grand Earth trine is Jupiter and Uranus, conjunct in Taurus, with Jupiter's the planet of manifestation himself, and Uranus is like the anything can happen and probably will. And given that they are right now about 7 degrees apart, that's close enough to be a bona fide conjunction, we are more likely in this new moon to easily be able to tap into intentions that are already possible from our sense of what we believe. And I would say even this, that Jupiter getting close to Uranus allows us to have greater access to the things that below the surface of our conscious awareness we actually do believe that we can manifest. With the added oomph and confidence of Jupiter saying, you can have anything. So that's amplified. That idea is amplified, that I can create anything that I want. So I love this beautiful grand Earth trine being part of the intention-setting mechanism because it allows us to take those intentions and put them just where they need to be to powerfully create things in our future. And the last thing I'll say about Thursday's new moon is, now this is a new moon, so it's not archetypally about release. We talk about release in the full moon. But it ain't like we don't release in a new moon and that we can't have a harvest of a benefit in the new moon either, or that we're not going to begin something at a full moon. We might, right? So it's not quite that cut and dry. But there is a release mechanism built into this new moon by virtue of the sun and the moon at 21 Virgo in conjuncting, my favorite angle in astrology, that great eliminator angle with Chiron and the north node of the moon in Aries. Chiron and the north node hanging out together within about 7 degrees of each other, close enough to be conjunct. That means to vibrate each other. And what this suggests just up in the cosmos this entire, late summer is that healing stuff that we've been working on is helping us move towards our Dharma, destiny, and desired future. Chiron, North Node conjunct. So the geometry between 21 Virgo and 18 through 25 Aries, where Chiron and the North Node are, is an exact 150-degree in conjunct quincunx, or my way of describing it is the great eliminator angle. So when you sit down to set intentions in this healing new moon that's ruled partially by Chiron, take a moment before you codify what you intend. And this is a good one to do this in writing because it's a Mercury-ruled and a Chiron-ruled new moon. Use the Mercury-ruled portion of it to write out your intentions. First, start with an inventory of all of the wound healing that you've been up to in the past few months so that your psyche is well aligned with the idea of, I'm ready to set this intention because I've done the work to release the wounded sense of undeserving that would have inhibited me from setting such intentions in the past. Definitely do some consideration about the healing processes if you've been in, and you'll have a richer experience of the intentions you set at this time. So I spoke out of turn, kids, in the earlier segment, and I just decided not to go back and correct it, and I'll just correct it here for you, and we'll leave the error in. I kept saying that, isn't it elegant that Mercury turns around and goes direct on Wednesday, right before the new moon. Now, I don't know where I got that, because right here on my outline, it says very clearly that Mercury goes direct on Friday, the 15th, the day after the new moon. So that does mean that Mercury is retrograde while we're setting intentions. I will put a positive spin on that because Mercury retrograde means that our minds are more deeply connected to our unconscious than our conscious awareness. And we can take advantage of that and just know that we'll be setting intentions from a juicy place because Mercury is, in fact, retrograde on Thursday when the new moon hits. And then Friday, he turns around, goes direct, and puts the backward portion of his cycle to bed. Thank God. And then Venus is complete with her backward motion. Mercury is complete with his backward motion. And we can sort of thank the gods and goddesses that we got through the double retrograde.
Yeah. So we're just sailing forward through the fall.
Well, we still have the wrap-up. Remember, there's always 3 acts of every retrograde, and we're in that with Venus. We're in what's called the direct shadow. Direct because the planets are now both moving direct. They're not backwards, they're direct. But it's shadow, meaning they're both covering territory that they've been over twice before. So Venus is doing that now. In fact, the next segment of the podcast is about her first triple transit in this 3rd wrap-up act. Because she turned around on the 3rd of September. And then on Saturday the 16th, she will do her first thing, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And then Friday of this week is when Mercury's direct shadow begins. And that wrap-up period is from this Friday, the 15th, through the end of the month on the 30th. Now, the first beginning dates were August 3rd to the 23rd of August. That was the retrograde shadow, where stuff might have come up that was bumpy, that we were being told we might face during the retrograde. That retrograde section was August 23rd through this Friday. And then the wrap-up Friday through the 30th. And just know that we're fully prepared because we've been through this stuff twice before, because Mercury's no longer backward moving. Everything that happens in the last 2 weeks of the month will not feel as discombobulating as the first 2 weeks of the month because he's direct. But we are addressing communication and perception challenges that have been with us since the beginning of August, and we have 2 weeks to wrap it up. And in fact, the essence of this retrograde cycle was deeply healing. Mercury was hitting Chiron in the inconjunct, the great eliminator angle. Just as the new moon is doing that on Friday, Mercury did that 3 times from his perch in Virgo. So this has been a very healing Mercury retrograde. And a very agitating one with, sesqui squares, agitated geometry from Mercury to the North Node, the future, and Pluto, power struggles, right? So we have 2 weeks of more healing and more power struggles. Trine from Mercury to Jupiter can also make all of those things a little over the top. So I would say this wrap-up is bumpier than some, but it's still the wrap-up. He's still direct. What you're talking about, Zoe, I call the free and clear portion of Mercury's cycle. And that begins in October, October 1st. You can count on October and November to have 2 full months with no delays built in, no retrograde in sight, communication more smooth and clean. But we got to get through the last 2 weeks of this month first. So indeed, Venus turned around and went direct on September 3rd. And this is the first of the triple transits that she will make in her wrap-up. She will square Jupiter on Saturday. Venus and Jupiter in any connection is ultimately a positive thing. You're talking about an interaction between love and abundance. And how bad could that be, right? Love and abundance in an interaction. And there's an old trope in astrology. I've said it lots of times, probably even on this podcast. There's no such thing as a bad Jupiter transit. But a square is still a square, which means it's a conflict energy. Venus may be love and Jupiter may be abundance, but they want it in different ways in a square. One of the artifacts of this transit, it would be over the top, the urge to party, extravagant gestures that come from the heart, but big ones, the kind that you regret. Or maybe not. I mean, it might not be fair to say the kind you regret, but certainly the ones that you might regret because they're a little bit too much, a little extra. So the first time this hit was the second week in June. June 11th is the specific date. You want to give a couple of days of leeway on either side. The second date was August 22nd. And that was when they squared again with Venus being backward moving. And then The third time is this weekend on Saturday. I literally had a party in the second one. My 60th birthday was the next day, right? This peaked on the 22nd, and I was running around. I was running around Los Angeles for 2 days getting ready for my little party. So if you had a reason to party, then this wouldn't have been an outsized transit. But if you didn't and you did anyway, so you want to look back at these dates just to make an assessment. If there were challenges in either the June 11th or the August 22nd period of time that connected to your relationships, your emotional body, your just feelings in general, or how you approach the things you desire or feel strongly about in your heart, then you can expect some wrap up this coming weekend. I'm not expecting anything to be worthy of my consideration because I remember August 22nd and 3rd really well because I was doing what I just said I was doing. And so I'm not going to look to this weekend and say, oh God, I better be ready for what comes, because what was coming in the backward motion for me personally wasn't reflective of a problem that needed my attention, right? It was just party time.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be a fun weekend for me. You know, who knows, right? I don't even know what I've got planned. You understand, when I suggest the backward dates, it's not to go on an excavation till you find it. It's to glance back, and if something grabs you, then pay attention to it. If it doesn't grab you, let it go. Because sometimes I think people hear something and they're like, I got to find the pony in this horse shit. You know, I'll dig and dig till I find it.
Yeah, I just glanced back at my calendar, and I was having a great time on the 11th. I had a little party myself, so.
Okay, so there you go. I'm so glad you pointed that out, because sometimes people will overdo the superstition part of it.
Right.
It's still important for me as the astrologer to point out the challenge for those who experience a challenge. Mm-hmm. For example, anybody with an escapism journey might have had, you know, if they're in a vulnerable place, the party that they had on the 11th or the August 22nd might not have been in their best interests, and that would be something to consider, right?
Yeah.
But this could also just be a wide, expansive, fun old time, and that's possible. This is not a bad idea, just to do a general shout out to people about superstitions and astrology. Someone reached out to me on social media. They were very worried about a biopsy thing they had to do while Mercury was still retrograde, and she was really freaking out about it.
Huh.
She was like considering changing the date. I'm like, don't change the date. You're freaking out because I didn't say all of this, but I basically said, don't collapse the superstitions about a retrograde with what's coming over the horizon at you naturally and organically. Her biopsy results are not going to be different if she waits a week for Mercury to go direct.
Right.
Her freak out is about the freak out. She might freak out more because Mercury's retrograde, but it won't change the results of the biopsy. You honor the horizon, not the superstition. So, similarly, back to this again, this weekend. Have at it. If it's a fun weekend with a little bit of party and extravagant gestures and it's all fun and yummy, and the way you'll know whether to anticipate that or not is to look back at August 22nd or June 11th. And if there is a challenge from those times, be a little extra mindful this weekend as we move through a square between Venus and Jupiter, bringing about a little bit over-the-top extraness on Saturday. And if you don't have something challenging around that, have a wonderful weekend, kids. And as I like to say, have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. Today we have someone calling in from Oregon City, Oregon. Jessica, welcome to the show. What you dreaming?
Hi. Thank you for having me. It's so good to be on. I appreciate this opportunity.
Well, we love you coming and sharing. Yay.
Oh, this is so great. I'm so excited. Okay. So, my dream. First, I have always been a vivid dreamer. And there's been a period of time, I would say within this last year and a half, where I'm just not remembering my dreams. And it's like, wait, I've been a dreamer all my life. And I love my weirdo dreams.
What happened?
And I would say this dream was around October-ish. So essentially, my dream was I had pulled out one of my back molars with my right hand. It felt like I needed to come out. There wasn't any sort of pain, but I pulled it out and I went and I placed it into my left hand. When I went to go look at my molar, it was the biggest, like fossilized roots and all type of tooth. Like I could describe it as if you were to go to a museum and see the dinosaurs, they look all fossilized. Yeah. And it was so outstanding and graphic and vivid. And then my left hand was not my hand anymore. It was this intricate display of interwoven blood vessels. It was beautiful. It just like went into affinity. And it was like pumping blood, like these weaves of just blood vessels. And here my fossilized molar in its vividness. And I was just staring at it in awe. And then I woke up.
Oh my Lord. I love these distinctions.
Craziness.
Teeth dreamings. They're not an uncommon dream. Teeth falling out, pulling teeth. It's about like the fifth most common recurring image is dreams around the mouth and teeth. I made that up about fifth. That's not a scientific rating. I'm just saying it's not as common as falling or being chased or tsunamis,
Oh, yeah,
or
too.
zombie apocalypse dreams. But it's a standard recurring dream. But what I love is you have all of these extra like distinctions about it with the hands and the whatnot, which gives us a little bit more juice to work with. First and foremost, though, let's just speak to the rhythm of dream memory. Yeah. This is very natural. On a certain level, we couldn't possibly describe why someone who vividly remembers dreams will remember them, easily for periods of time and then it diminishes, but it happens all the time. I have said this in the past. I don't know how much I believe it, but I say it, that if you're not remembering your dreams with your conscious memory and you are someone who typically does, then it's because you don't need to. That stuff is happening below the surface a little bit more. The unconscious isn't saying, oh, gee, Jessica needs to pay attention to this. It's doing its work at a lower level. Again, this is not scientific. This is me going like, here's my woo-woo sort of opinion about why that might be. But I want to make sure that we speak to it because having heard dreams for decades and decades and decades from dreamers, I just want you to know it's very common to go through periods where dream memory is less.
Okay. I did not know that. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, teeth are something that perform a couple of different functions. when the molars are most connected with the digestive function, because it's there at the molars where we're literally preparing our food to be ingested. Like we tear our food with our front teeth, but we prep the body to receive the nourishment with the molars grinding the food down. Now, teeth also attract love in the form of the smile, right? We smile to each other and people respond immediately. It's an automatic, almost visceral thing that a smile begets a smile. So then in symbolic land, the teeth are also connected with the capacity to attract love. Now, we are not snarlers or growlers. We've moved beyond growling and snarling, but we're still animals, and animals snarl and growl to protect themselves. It's a ferocity moment. So you reveal your teeth in a smile and attract love, or you can reveal your teeth in a snarl and protect yourself, and you use your teeth to nourish your body with the molars. So also, given that the teeth are in the mouth and the mouth is the seat of communication, any teeth dream is also going to be about communication and your voice. Okay, so that's the general landscape when we're in teeth. So something being pulled out means a change is happening. Some growth or shift or change is happening. And it might have something to do with primal sense of needs met. That's right, because the molars connected mostly to prep of food and digestion. You can think of that as a needs met function. And there's something interesting to me about the way you're perceiving this tooth. You use a lot of language that suggests ancient history.
Yeah.
Right? You even say it was fossilized.
Yes, it appeared as if it was petrified wood almost.
Right, and that takes enormous amounts of time to create a fossilization. And so just by your mind, your brain choosing that word, then we know that if this dream is reflecting a pattern of yours around self-care, needs met, we're talking about something ancient. So then I go to family dynamics, how we pass along from generation to generation ideas about needs met that are potentially problematic because we teach our children to be like we were, and so on and so on. So I think the fossilized tooth piece means we're looking at something that's generational and historical because it's ancient, it's fossilized, it's been around a long time.
Okay.
So you pull it with the right hand, but receive it in your left. So the right is the masculine side, and that's about doing and action and behaviors. So I think you pulling the molar out with your right hand is to consider what ways of sustaining and nurturing myself through behavior needs to be changed or considered differently. So you put it into your feminine hand, the hand of perception and being and understanding the bigger picture. You know, the masculine principle doesn't know from bigger picture. It just says, what am I going to do now in terms of action, movement, and making something happen? Where the feminine principle says, wait a minute, hold down there, masculine principle. Have we considered everything? Are we containing this well? What do we need to know about this from a holistic perspective? That's a feminine principle. And it's when you consider this old, ancient, habitual pattern of self-care or lack of self-care, and you put it in the place in your psyche that's better at understanding things, because that's a feminine principle as well. We don't understand with the masculine. We just keep fucking doing. Right. And in a good society, the masculine and feminine balance where the feminine is in charge and gives permission or not to the masculine. The masculine says, I want to do this. The feminine says, yes, you can. No, you can't. It's not time. So that's a perfect society, which we don't have in Western culture, would have that balance between masculine and feminine. All right. So in this consideration of a pattern of perhaps lack of care that you see as ancient, i.e. fossilized, you then get an image that represents like the immediate moment of your body's needs. You see your body's functioning, all of those blood vessels. And you even talk about how beautiful and magnificent it is.
It was so vivid.
And when you look at the body like that, it is beautiful and magnificent. It's stunning. And the vessels look like the villi in the intestines, which look like leaves of trees. I mean, there's all of these profound ways. But isn't it interesting that you have on one hand, something old, fossilized, stuck, and in an ancient, never-changing sense. And then the opposite, in the feminine principle side, you get a kind of biological immediacy. If you're seeing blood vessels, then you're seeing what's being pumped right here, right now in your organic body. So if you have like old ideas about what's needed in sustenance, self-care, and other forms of care that's just old, like what you were taught, that might be circumnavigating the actual biological needs of the body at the moment. Like even if we go back to the molar as preparatory for sustenance in the form of food, it's like on the fossilized molar side, it's like, yeah, I can chew my food. My family's been chewing food for generations, and they taught me how to chew food. But if I consider it from a more holistic, feminine place, I see that my blood vessels are not fed by fossilized teeth.
Interesting. Very interesting.
So I do. What would you say are some of the themes about like self-care that you learned in your family of origin?
Oh, goodness. Well, I can tell you that within the last 2.5 years, my personal self-care routine has changed tremendously.
Beautiful.
Yes. So just I would say within the last 1.5 years, I have been incorporating meditation, just delving down the spiritual rabbit holes that I can find, anything and everything, astrology, tarot.
I love it.
So I had just, during the time of this dream, which I think was around October-ish, just delving into learning about the different types of meditations and crystals and just all these different rabbit holes. So it came as a time when I was sort of shifting my perspective.
Indeed. Looking into new ways of being in your body that's more directly impacting how the blood is flowing through your body at this given moment, which is indeed like prayer and self-care. Absolutely. All that work is about the blood pumping through your veins and making the moment more powerful and graceful because you're attending to your body's needs. And then it was like saying, oh yeah, this old way, this old molar, I don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
Because I'm learning how to chew my food in a new, more holistic, self-care oriented kind of way.
That would make sense.
Yay!
Definitely. That's so interesting.
Fun.
I love how you interpret dreams.
Oh, thank you. Well, and thank you for coming on and sharing it. And I love the extra little distinctions we had for working with it. Yay.
I surely appreciate it. I love your show. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.